The West has been so completely infected by PC culture and identity politics that any criticism of ideologies or certain people is immediately conflated to racism, sexism, etc., etc. Rather than foster social and cultural harmony, this blatant suppression of thought is actively strengthening real prejudice in society. You needn't look very far to know this is not limited to just the UK. There's the New Year's Eve Cologne attacks, media coverage of minority crimes, and much, much more. If everything is true about those rape gangs in the UK, how the hell are those men getting away with such heinous crimes for so long? I get the whole fear of being labeled a racist, bureaucratic ineptitude, etc., but don't those policemen have daughters of their own? Would they not put themselves in the shoes of the parents of those children? Has the West become so weak that it cannot recognize such blatant evil and rectify this injustice? That's from Brandon.
Oh, hey, Brandon.
Hey, Stefan. Thanks for having me on the show.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So the rape gangs in the UK, you're talking about the Rotherham scandal where, yeah, I think it was a Pakistani men who had been sort of grooming and raping hundreds and hundreds of young British girls for quite some time, and there was some concern about bringing them to justice because there was fears that the police might be called racist or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's right. I believe they called him Asian, but yeah, I believe it was Pakistani.
Yeah. Yeah. And where were all the people protesting that? You got people out on the left protesting the Brexit vote, right? That England is now Britain seems poised to leave the EU. And they're out there protesting with signs and chants and yelling their outrage. Was anyone doing this when these horrible crimes came to light?
Yeah, no, not at all.
No?
It's a stark contrast to what I do see in media here in the U.S., which is, the people at the stations welcoming the refugees with teddy bears and signs and water, which is all anyone ever really sees. I don't have really a lot of friends that have been red-pilled, so the people that I do talk to are pretty plugged in. They really have no idea. And when I talk about something like the Rotherham rape scandal, it's a blank look at best.
Right.
Which is, it's frustrating.
But you say sort of like there's this weird infection. I mean, I don't think it's an infection. I mean, an infection is sort of accidental or random.
Right.
This is not. I mean, look, the left has been discredited in the West since the 1960s. Since Khrushchev pointed out the crimes of Stalin, and since the horrifying atrocities committed by Chairman Mao and his Communist Party in China all came to light, they're done.
Yeah.
Like the left, it's paradise over. They're done, right?
Right.
And so they didn't want to give up just because they lost not only the theoretical argument, but the empirical argument, right? Because, and this is why I was hammering on the last guy about, theory and practice. There's nothing that's beautiful in theory that's terrible in practice. Everything that's terrible in practice is terrible in theory. Everything that's brutal in practice is irrational in theory.
Yeah.
My theory that balsa wood is a wonderful material for a train bridge is beautiful in no. It's stupid in theory, and it's terrible and destructive in practice.
Yeah, funny thing, my younger sister, we had a bit of a discussion over one of the past holidays where she was like, communism would be great in it's great in theory, but it just doesn't work too well in the real world.
Everyone says that who doesn't have a clue. Like everyone who says, just ask that person, can you explain to me the theory of communism? Some guy with a big beard? I don't know. If it's a wall? I don't know. So, no. So forget it's like an infection. It's an occupation of people who've lost the argument. It's all it is. The left can't win an argument to save their lives. And so what do? Do they say, we had this theory, it started off with communism, and then we said socialism. Of course, the goal of socialism, according to Lenin, is communism. And so did they say, well, we had this great theory. It was put into practice in like a third of the world's population. And I don't know, after China, after Russia, after the Eastern Bloc, after the Khmer Rouge, after God knows how many countries tried it, and it was all turned into a blood-soaked murder fest all around, you think people would say, maybe this isn't such a great idea. But there are selected. Hang on. But there are selected. They don't care. They want power. They don't want to be in the free market because they'll get more money and power by being in the government. And they need a big government because a bigger government can buy more votes. And so they lost the argument in the 1960s when communism became discredited, and all the lies that all the people had told about communism, they went and toured all of these, what were called Potemkin villages, where they'd take a bunch of people from the Gulag, feed them up, and pretend they were all happy and wonderful. Walter Durant of the New York Times won a Pulitzer Prize writing about these atrocities, never been rescinded. And then what happened was Joseph McCarthy and Whittaker Chambers and other people came along and exposed how many of these communists had wormed their way into the U.S. government and how they'd helped hand over China to communism, one of the great disasters of the 20th century, if not, well, certainly in the top three. So they had this theory, and then they got to implement this theory in a wide variety of countries, and everywhere it was tried, it was a god-awful, psychotic, disastrous, murderous, monstrous mess.
Yeah.
So they lost the argument because, they could maintain it under Stalin, but when Khrushchev called Stalin's cult of personality and revealed all of the horrifying stuff that went on. And of course, when Solzhenitsyn published his writings, the Gulag Archipelago and other writings talking about the prison camps, the concentration camps, the unbelievably horrifying stuff that occurred. And then I think there's a bunch of French researchers who compiled the big black book of communism talking about how many died. So in the 1960s, this stuff came. China, I think, was a little later, but certainly in the early 1960s, mid-1960s, the facts about Russia just came tumbling out. So they lost. They lost. And what did they do? They say, man, we're sorry. That was just terrible. I can't believe we thought this was a good system that resulted in the deaths of so many people. No. They said, damn, we can't win this argument. We can't make a case that people should vote left because it's really great for people. So we just better import cultures that are going to vote left. Yeah. And this is why in the 1965, Teddy Kennedy sponsored this immigration bill specifically designed to cut off European immigration and replace it with third world immigration. Why? Because they lost the argument. And so they had to stuff the ballot with people who were going to vote left. And this is why the historically racist party of the Democrats switched and then began courting the black votes with welfare. Guaranteed votes. It was one of the most racist things done in American politics, and somehow the Republicans are racist. And so they lost the argument, and so they had to import votes, and then they had to cover up all of the discrepancies that occurred as a result of importing third world cultures. Those third world cultures don't do that well in a first world country. So in order to cover that up, because people were going to notice that, this is another theory. Hey, everyone's the same. Don't worry, by the second generation, they'll be exactly like us. If not, halfway through the first generation. We're all just made of water. You pour them into magic soil, they'll become just like us, right? Well, at some point, people were going to say, I don't think that's happening. I don't think that there's that much integration from the third world cultures going on in the West. So what did they have to do? Because that's another theory. We're all the same. Everyone's the same. Kumbaya. We're all going to end up the same. In multiculturalism, diversity is all wonderful and it's a strength, and right? And then people at some point were going to notice that it wasn't working at all. And then, what do? Well, what do tyrannical personalities always do with counter data? They attempt to shut it up. They attempt to squelch it. They attempt to attack it. And so you have to invent racism to cover up the fact that racists don't perform equally well in Western societies. And coincidentally, it seems to have a lot to do with IQ. So you have to racism. And that way no one can talk about facts which go counter to what the left needs, which is votes, which they can't get with good arguments and good data. Because communism killed 100 million people. That's like 2.5 World War IIs. Sorry if I'm skeptical, lefties, but that's a lot of blood to overlook. I can't Jesus waddle my way across that much fucking gore.
No, certainly not.
So they have to cover up the failures of their theories. And so when Joseph McCarthy pointed out that there was a giant rot in the American government, Soviet spies, they attacked him, destroy him, make an example out of him. And he died young, died in his 50s. And when people start to notice that disparate ethnic groups are not all blending and doing the same, racism, it's racism that's the cause, and you're racist for pointing it out, because it goes against the narrative they need to get votes because they lost the argument. And then when people say, women make different choices than men, they choose usually to work, on average, right, as a whole, they choose to work less than men. They choose to take jobs with more flexibility. They take more part-time jobs. And that's why they make 70-odd cents on the dollar compared to men. Sexism. You can't even talk about it. It's wrong. It's this, it's that. 97% of climate scientists, the people are academics suggesting that people who are climate change skeptics should be thrown in jail. See, when you've lost the argument, you attack. Jason Richwine, been on the show a couple of times, has data that shows something that goes against the left's narrative. Destroy him! Attack him! When the argument is lost, as Socrates said, when the argument is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. So it's not an infection. It's not a random thing. They want the left pushes for free or subsidized higher education because they love for hardworking free market Republican taxpayers to be forced to subsidize the leftist indoctrination of the young. I mean, it's perfect. It's perfect. Can you imagine Republicans demanding? Can you imagine Republicans demanding that leftists be forced through taxes to pay for mandatory Sunday school?
No.
For all leftists?
No.
They'd go insane. That's indoctrination. That's wrong.
Brainwashing.
So it's not an accident. It's just what people do when they're addicted to power. They don't care about the long. They just need the power. They need the power. Want the power. So when you have rape gangs in the United Kingdom, and as there are in other places, so the Rotherham thing, I just give you a couple of details, is 1,400 children were subjected to appalling sexual exploitation in Rotherham in England between 1997 and 2013. So that's a long time. Time. A report found, quote, several staff described their nervousness about identifying the ethnic origins of perpetrators for fear of being thought as racist. Others remembered clear direction from their managers not to do so. Failures by those charged with protecting children happened despite 3 reports between 2002 and 2006, which both the council and police were aware of, and, quote, which could not have been clearer in the description of the situation in Rotherham. The first of these reports was effectively suppressed because senior officers did not believe the data. The other 2 were ignored. And that's because the left needs votes. And if 1,400 British children need to be groomed, assaulted, sexually assaulted, and raped, and some set on fire with gasoline or threatened with it if they didn't conform, well,
left needs
votes.
Right, but that's a hell of a sacrifice. That's awful, beyond all reason. I mean...
Not to an addict. Right? Not to an addict. Because an addict, a real addict, they destroy their families, they burn through all their savings, they steal from businesses, they commit crimes, they prostitute themselves, to get your drug of choice. That's what you do.
What about? I mean, it makes sense for the the officers, the higher up officers, the administrators, and whatnot. But what about the boots on the ground policemen who are seeing this like firsthand? Like,
where are they going to go? Oh, I know. Let's go to the media. Huh. Seems that the media doesn't want to promote things which go against the leftist narrative.
Yeah.
And also, what if they get caught going to the media? What if someone finds out that they went against their direct orders, leaked to the media? Ooh, could be quite exciting.
Right.
Because the media doesn't want this information out. Again, I'm collecting this. There's right media, but in general, the media tends left throughout the West. So the media, it might be a trap. The reporter might say, "Oh, you've got some cool stuff about Rotherham," and the cop sits down, a policeman sits down, tells them all, and then the media turn around, stab, and says, "This guy is revealing information against his orders." Boom! The third officer involved in this Freddie Gray Baltimore situation, the guy who was arrested and injured his neck or his spine and died.
Right.
The third officer has now been acquitted. I don't even know if they're going to continue. As the police chief saying, stop this malicious prosecution. Do they care? The people who are pumping this narrative, like all this race baiting stuff that goes on in American media, do they care?
No, of course not.
That hundreds of black lives have been lost as a result of the police being somewhat paralyzed out of fear of malicious prosecution? They got the power. They got the votes. They riled up people and got them to vote left. I don't know. I can't fathom. I can't fathom the entire mental structure that would allow for years the continued sexual assault of children to pass by.
Yeah.
I can't fathom. I can't fathom that as a concept. How this could happen. But that's because I'm not an addict to power.
I actually have I sent in this question, I think about 4 or 5 months ago. And since then, I've consumed quite a bit of media trying to get to the bottom of this rabbit hole. And I kind of have somewhat of a running idea that answers my question. And that is that people are very willing to shed their empathy when it's politically and socially convenient. So, I mean, that's the only thing I can come to, trying to understand why those guys, the lower officers, were seeing what was happening and not doing anything about it.
Look, it may have tortured some of them, and maybe they quit because of it. But knowing that children are being assaulted by, I don't care what ethnicity, it could be foreheads and liver spots on your ass, I don't care. But, I mean, maybe they quit. But I don't know. I mean, how can people do this? Wouldn't that be in your head? What was going on year after year after year after year? And why isn't anyone protesting? I thought the left was against the rape culture. Now, I'm not saying that all Pakistanis, of course not, right? But in this particular gathering of Pakistanis, well, seems kind of rapey.
Just a tad bit rapey. Yeah, it's, and the reason why I actually submitted the question in the first place is because it's really, you can't bring this up with people who, or it's very difficult to bring this up with people who are not already in somewhat of the know of what's going on in Europe. I live in the West Coast of America, and it's just like, you bring this up with normal people, and they're like what? That makes no sense. The first reaction is disbelief. They're like, nah, that's whatever. They're blowing it up or blowing it out of proportion, or it didn't happen, or not to that extent, and blah, 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 blah. They don't see it as like an existential, in a way, an existential threat to Western society, which is kind of how I look at it. This is really, there's no way to relate that this is going on and have any kind of meaningful conversation at where I'm at, which I think if that conversation was to happen, that there might actually be, I don't know, because I can be completely delusional or too optimistic to think that, people would be outraged here over stuff happening over there. You know.
Right. I don't know. I mean, because I don't care what people do with the truth. I can't, because I can't control that. Right? I speak passionately and hopefully intelligently and with sources about things that matter, things that are important. Does it matter what people believe? Does it matter what ideologies put forward? Does it matter that communism concentrates economic power into the hands of a tiny elite? It matters. Now, what people do with all of that, I don't know. I don't know, and I can't fundamentally worry about it or care about it. Right. I care about the presentation because, try and get it across in a way that helps. But what they do with that information. So you're saying, well, what will people do with this information?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know, but you speak the truth. This is how I was raised. I was told as a child. I was told as a child in church. I was told as a child in church, speak the truth and shame the devil. Speak the truth and shame the devil. Because if you speak the truth, you will very quickly find out who's on the side of good and who's not.
Right.
Because you can't be on the side of good and reject the truth.
I don't know though, Stefan, that it's a rejection of the truth. It's like they just don't. It's a non-concern. They don't care. They're not promoting the devil, but they're not embracing the truth. It's just kind of this middle ground where it's just like, well, if that's over there, I'm here. It's not affecting me. It's cool. Whereas I look at it, I'm like, that's over there. That's happening. That's evil. Like, if we don't face that now, it's going to come to our front door.
Well, again, I mean, what people do with it, who knows, right? I mean, you've just got to tell the truth. After that, it's out of your hands. You can put a billboard with a tasty-looking meal out front of your restaurant, but you can't go and drag people into your restaurant to eat and make them eat. Right? You make a nice restaurant, you have good food, you make it attractive, you put a sign outside, you put an ad out, and you wait. Right? So, how am I going to make people eat at my restaurant? You can't.
Yeah.
Can't do it. Can't do it. Now, you can put the truth out there, the facts out there.
I've heard you, I listen to your show quite a lot. I've listened to basically, I've heard this same discussion with the callers you've had before, where they're like wondering how they can get this truth how they can make the truth have an impression or effect on their friends and family. And you always tell them kind of the same thing you're telling me now, which is, bounce it off them a little bit and see if there's any kind of response. And if not, move on. But
if I knew, or if there was even a way, Brandon, to make people receive the truth, it wouldn't be the truth anymore. The truth has to be chosen, right? The truth has to be chosen. The virtue has to be chosen, or it's not virtue. Force people to do things. You just turn them into an empty, obedient robot shell of compliance. Fear of virtue.
Right.
There's nothing virtuous about the welfare state because it's compelled. Nothing virtuous about government education because it's compelled.
Right.
It's compelled. No, the degree to which you compel is the degree to which you strip people of free will and of their capacity to actually be good. And so even if there was a way to compel virtue among people, which is kind of a rank contradiction, I don't know. And even if I did, then you wouldn't have to worry about it because I'd have some magic wand to make people rational and virtuous, and you wouldn't have to do a damn thing.
Yeah. Job would be done.
Yeah. Boom. Magic wand.
There was a recent show of yours with a Hispanic or I don't know, Mexican or whatever he was, a Trump supporter who came on your show and kind of told the truth about how Hispanics and Mexicans in America feel. Like
his friends, his circle, right? I mean, he obviously
his circle, right?
for
Yeah,
all
of course.
but yeah, his circle.
Yeah, but not all, right? Yeah, and I myself am half. My father was born in Mexico, and my mother's white, and I was raised here, and all the stuff he was saying, I could cooperate. I mean, it was
so
spot on.
you technically you'd be called Hispabad sunburn. Just kidding. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I know, but I kind of had the luxury. I grew up away from all that. My parents divorced when I was a baby, and I lived with my mom and white people. No, but my father ended up going out and marrying other women and just going elsewhere. But so I missed all of that. But where I grew up, there was a lot of Hispanics, Mexicans. I saw all of it. I saw the views kind of afar of some of my Mexican family members, and all the stuff he said was true. It was actually good to hear someone talk about it honestly, who had been in the thick of it, because his experience is certainly very different than mine. Yeah, fortunately for me, I guess, but I wasn't surrounded by regressive leftists my entire life. But he seemed to pull himself out of it, and it's like you said, like his words, your truth had an effect on him. He just chose it, and he was asking you how to impart it on his friends and family. But yeah, it's the same thing. It has to be chosen, I guess.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to sort of, like, there's this weird infection. It's not a weird infection. It's the need to put your finger on the scale because your meat gone rotten, right? I mean, that's a really bad analogy, but they lost the argument, so they need to stuff the ballot, right? I mean, if you can really beat the other guy in the boxing ring, you don't need to fix the match, right?
Right.
So when people can't win a political argument, they need to import people who are going to vote for them, and for the left, that's non-Europeans. Back in the 60s, Europeans didn't want a big, giant government. But, as we've seen from a bunch of studies which we've done, which we've referenced on this show, a lot of people from the third world very comfortable with lots of government benefits and big governments. And we can understand why when we look at a variety of other factors, which we've talked about before. So,
right. I actually heard kind of a decent analogy for as opposed to an infection. I heard another analogy about PC culture. Do you know a spider wasp? Are you familiar with a spider wasp?
A spider walk?
Wasp.
Oh, a spider wasp. They're back.
Yes.
Not from Australia, are they?
No.
Okay, a spider wasp. No, go ahead.
Okay, so basically, a spider wasp will find a larger, healthy spider, a live spider, to land on and infect with their eggs, so that the wasp's young, the eggs, has something to grow into and then hatch and eat. And obviously, when they hatch and begin to eat on the spider dies. So that was an analogy I heard. This is not mine. I'm just repeating it. Someone else said about what PC culture does to Western society and Western values. That it will eventually be fatal. And you could look at it that the wasp is it has intent. Like it's like you said, not a random infection. There's intent in this process.
Yeah, no, it's not accidental. And of course, because people are very good at convincing themselves that what they want to do that serves their lusts is good, then there's the additional benefit of that the people on the left, and I have no idea to what degree this is true or accurate, but I mean, I'm sure that a lot of them really genuinely believe that they are trying to do the right thing, and they that this is the only good way to get things done, and they have that particular perspective. And
right.
So when something is both at least the the heroin addict is usually not saying what a great cool thing he's doing. Like he might he might at the beginning, I'm on the edge. I'm, like Hendrix, I'm going to be creative, whatever. But later he's just like, no virtue here. I just need a fix, right? But when you can virtue signal and there's an addiction, which I think is the essence of the unholy convergence of addiction, political power, and sort of basic human lust and virtue signaling, it really becomes very difficult to change over.
Yeah, in relation to this, I kind of had a similar conversation with my wife recently. She lived in Orlando for the last couple of years, and she just came back not a month ago. And she's not American. She's from somewhere else, and she was very troubled by what happened. First of all, because she has friends who have gone to that club. Luckily, all her friends were okay. But she kind of was distraught that somebody could do this, and why they could do something so evil. And I told her, I was like, you got to look at it like he does not think he's doing evil when he's killing them. Like, he thinks what he's doing is right. Like, he is acting justly according to his beliefs. And I think that kind of helped her process it a bit better. But as well as you can process something like that.
Yeah. No, that is important. And again, to be fair, vast majority of Muslims would not act on those beliefs, but he did.
Of course.
And, are the beliefs completely irrelevant? There's a case to be made either way, but I don't think we should immediately dismiss the question. So,
right.
So yeah,
right.
I hope that it helps that it's not just a random thing, and it's not right. I mean, how do they get away with heinous crimes? Well, because the left wants to import people from the third world to vote for the left, and right. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few hundred little girls.
Yeah, it's disgusting to my core.
Oh, it is, of course, and the general anti-white racism is pretty clear that if this was a white gang targeting black girls, I mean, can you imagine?
No, it'd have been a media outrage for months.
Oh, it would be. I mean, it would be shocking and unstoppable and ever escalating. But this, it tells you everything that you need to know about a lot of topics, sadly. And I'll let people mull that over as they see fit.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna close up the show, but I really, really do appreciate everyone calling in. It is a great honor, privilege, and joy to be able to chat with y'all. And FDRURL.com/donate or freedomainradio.com/donate to help us out. If you want to get some free books, I haven't mentioned this enough, but I should. Freedomainradio.com/free to check out the books. You can use our affiliate link, FDRURL.com/Amazon. Follow me on Twitter at Stefan Molyneux. Thank you, everyone, so much for giving us the resources to be able to get a couple of million people to Brexit videos, Brexit podcasts, and combined shows I did with other people. It is a real privilege, and we really, really, together as a community, we really moved the needle on that vote, and it's a very powerful thing to have done. And I really thank you for the resources to be able to allow us to do that and to help us to do even more. freedomainradio.com/donate. Have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful night, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.